What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the word stealth? It has a different meaning to each and every one of us. Is it sneaking through a facility completely undetected, or blending in plain sight near your target? Unfortunately, the term stealth isn't in the vocabulary of the mainstream gamer. Far too often I hear that people would prefer to tackle a mission loudly if given the option. This supplies us with a problem. Our favorite video game genre is slowly fading into obscurity. If you were to ask anyone the question of what is the most popular video game genre, the response would most likely be the first-person shooter. Which is not an unexpected response. You've got games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, Titanfall, and Destiny all over the market. Let me ask you what you think the last AAA stealth title was. The correct answer is Hitman, with the first episode releasing on March 11th, 2016. But that game was deemed a failure by Square Enix. What about the biggest AAA stealth title before that one? That would be Metal Gear Solid 5, with it releasing on September 1st, 2015. Before that was Ground Zeroes releasing on March 18th, 2014, and before that was Splinter Cell Blacklist on August 20th, 2013. These are their own separate franchises bonded by genre, but why are they so far and few between? To me, this is the perfect example of the JRPG renaissance that was in the 90s. Final Fantasy was on top of the world and the video game industry was churning out JRPGs at an incredible rate. But at some point, they started to become more obscure, less mainstream, and fall into the niche category. I believe the same thing is happening to stealth games. The only difference for the stealth game renaissance is that it took place in the 2000s. Metal Gear Solid was running rampant along with Splinter Cell and even Hitman. As of today, Splinter Cell has been missing for almost 5 years, and Hitman has just resurfaced after 4 years. Also, the gap from Metal Gear Solid 4 to 5 was a whopping 7 years. Juxtaposed to Call of Duty coming out with a new game every single year. Now, times change and trends fluctuate. Naturally, whatever becomes popular in the market becomes the focus of video game developers. They are in the business of making money, so can we really blame the video game developers for morphing their once tentpole aspects into something that would cater to the mainstream market? This is where I begin to see my favorite video game genre slowly die. The first example was Splinter Cell Blacklist. Now, I don't hate this game, but what I can say is I barely recognize it. It's now much more fast-paced and less focused on hiding in shadows. Also, loosening the requirement for having to be completely non-lethal opened up what I like to call the Rambo method. The idea that you will play stealth until the moment you get spotted, then... Now you might be saying to yourself, Chris, this is a good thing. More options make the game better. Well, I would argue that it breaks the game. The whole premise of Splinter Cell is that you're a secret stealth agent able to sneak into restricted areas and steal sensitive information, or capture specific targets and bring them back for interrogation. This doesn't entail leaving a massive body count in your wake. This is where ludonarrative dissonance takes form. The game states that you are one thing, but the actions of your character in-game depict something else. Now, I'm all for letting people play games the way they want to play them, but if that means that a developer has to shapeshift their game ideas to fit the mainstream's taste for freedom, do you really have the right to preach about letting gamers play the way they want to play when people can't handle games where a developer makes it strictly about stealth or non-lethal gameplay? Being presented with a game about pure stealth suddenly makes the developer restrictive and the game boring. A lot of people like to make fun of Splinter Cell Chaos Theory because there are no options for defense when spotted. You're usually stuck with shooting your gun, which has horrible accuracy, or just jumping around like a madman trying to dodge bullets, usually resulting in your death. There was a backlash for the lack of defensive options when things go loud, but what people fail to realize is that that game is supposed to be played with true stealth, meaning you're never supposed to be caught in the first place. It would literally break the design of the character that the game has created for you. A game that does embrace all forms of playstyle is the Hitman franchise. Hitman Blood Money literally has a rating for every level of violence that you can dish out. If you run around shooting an assault rifle in a crowded opera, you are deemed a psychopath in the newspaper. Now, while I understand that the game has a rating system set up in a way to fit all styles of play, it still breaks the character that Agent 47 is. He would never be seen holding an assault rifle sprinting through Mardi Gras just mowing down civilians. It makes no sense. So why does the option to do so exist? I believe it was an attempt to make the game appealing to a crowd who was never interested in the first place. The greatest example of this in today's society is what Metal Gear Solid has become. Yes, I'm talking about the infamous Metal Gear Survive. What was once a pillar in the stealth community has now crumbled into a zombie, fence-building horror amalgamation. You can literally thank Call of Duty Zombies mode for what you see in Metal Gear Survive. The impact that Call of Duty sales have on the industry are shown in what happened in Metal Gear. Companies fantasize about those Call of Duty numbers, and in order to rake in that kind of revenue, they believe they need to mimic what is on top of the sales charts. This is a natural step to follow whenever there is a game or genre that becomes king. We saw it back in the JRPG era with Final Fantasy, then the open world era with Grand Theft Auto 3, and now today with first-person shooters. So in order for stealth to be in the spotlight, there needs to be two things. An amazing game, followed by the mainstream market eating it up. But there's an anomaly here. The first ingredient is already there. In fact, it's been there since 2015, with the release of Metal Gear Solid 5. But while that game did great critically and commercially, the lens never shifted putting stealth back on the map. And here's why. Majority of people that played Metal Gear Solid 5 didn't play it stealthily. If the game had an end-screen result of how many people played loud versus stealth, like how Catherine shows what decisions people made, I'm willing to bet that it was overwhelmingly heavy on the loud side. The games offering the option to play loud and lethal is the genre's Achilles heel. Unfortunately, this means that the stealth genre was hidden in the background behind the action genre. I hope that when the newest Splinter Cell game releases, it will scrap the loud and lethal options to represent true hardcore stealth. Let's dive into some hard facts and sales figures. I want to compare the numbers of the Golden Era games to the stealth games of today. Now keep in mind that 1 million sales back in the PS2 era was a lot more monumental than today. Let's take a look at Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, arguably the best in the Splinter Cell series. According to the Wiki, VG charts, and Steam Spy, the game has sold an estimated total of 5 million copies. Now, this is obviously over multiple platforms and over a longer period of time, but for comparison, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory released on March 21st, 2005. And by the end of that same month, only 10 days later, it sold 2.5 million alone. That is bonkers for a PS2 game. To further hammer home how nuts that is, if we look at Metal Gear Solid 2, which was the most anticipated title of its time, in 5 days it sold 680,000 copies, which was considered a massive success back in 2001. Compare this to the latest Splinter Cell, Blacklist. Ubisoft was hoping to reach the 5 million marker, but as of November 13th, 2013, they only managed to sell 2 million copies. That was over a 3-month time span from its release. What would you say happened there? Blacklist was warped to give the players both a quiet and loud approach. Getting spotted was only a minor setback and you could just kill your way out of it. The game should appeal to the mainstream market, right? So where are the sales? This is hard evidence behind sticking true to your roots. Don't be a jack of all trades, be a master of one. Now while we only receive one AAA stealth game per year, the indie scene is loaded with stealth. We have titles like Counter Spy, Invisible Inc., and The Swindle. So you might be thinking to yourself that I shouldn't complain about not getting AAA stealth games that often if I have the indies to play. I would compare that to someone saying I shouldn't complain about not getting an adult-sized Krabby Patty, and that I should be content with the Pipsqueak Patty.
I don't want a Pipsqueak Patty, I want an adult-sized Krabby Patty.
I want the whole package. I want to see the bombastic cutscenes with amazing voice acting. I want the amazing graphics. I want the deep gameplay. I want the story to be thick. While I love all those indie titles I just mentioned, they don't hold a candle to Metal Gear Solid 2, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, and Hitman Blood Money. The one thing I believe that the indies get right that the AAA stealth games of today are missing is punishment. Compared to Dark Souls or even a basic 2D Mario game, there is a punishment for making the mistake of dodging at the wrong time, or miscalculating a jump and then you have to start over. And in the stealth games we see today, the punishment comes from a couple of extra guards showing up and turning into cannon fodder. Back in the day of the PS2 Golden Era, the punishment from getting spotted was indeed more guards arriving, but the difference was you were basically screwed from being overpowered until you die, naturally causing a restart and forcing you to try and stealth the situation. Today, when you are spotted in stealth games, you are an unstoppable force that can mow down any opposition in your way. I actually hate the meme, "nobody will notice if there's no one to notice." In all of these stealth games, you are portrayed as a normal man with a slight edge. You're supposed to die when reinforcements arrive. The Swindle pulls this off perfectly. The moment you get spotted, the cavalry literally comes crashing in and you are basically done for. If we feel like the punishment of restarting a mission if caught is wrong, then how come it's not wrong in a platformer or a fighter or a first-person shooter? The punishment doesn't draw people away from those other genres, but when it comes to stealth, it's suddenly too much? You got caught. You were supposed to slip in unnoticed. You were supposed to be a stealth badass. The AAA games need to take a page from the indie titles and properly dish out the punishment for screwing up, and not giving us ways to Rambo out of it. Now earlier, I mentioned that I want my stealth games to have deep story, and obviously you can't just have stealth gameplay be the only catalyst for telling your story. This is why we have crazy action sequences in Metal Gear Solid 2. I don't believe that all action and stealth is somehow degrading the genre. For example, look at the Splinter Cell franchise as a whole. The first 4 games were pure stealth. The 5th game added some pure action sequences to help convey their story, and they worked like a charm. I love the pure rage that bursts out of Fisher after 4 games of character building. It gave Fisher more depth. He is human. He is fed up with the lies, and the game gives you infinite mark and execute to mow down literally everyone in your path. And while I am a stealth fan at heart, this really made me love the game even more. So no, not all action needs to be banished from stealth games, but it needs to be a sliver of the final product. The stealth genre is barely hanging on as an unaware community coldly looks down on it. I'm hoping that people will be able to venture out of the popular trends and grab a hold of the stealth genre before it's too late. Thank you guys so much for watching. This video took me so long to finish, but it's finally done, and I'll show you guys a little preview of what it looks like in my editor. There's so many keyframes, like all these little minute details I had to work around and get all these pictures together. It was freaking crazy, but hopefully you guys can at least click that like button for me. And be sure to follow me on Twitter, because sometimes I put up a poll asking people that follow me what type of topic they want to see next. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you guys in the next one.